room. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, Master Tandir, Harold, Christoph. Good to see you on here. And then the mysterious stranger on the call-in user number 2. Whomever you are, welcome so much. Jake, hello. We're going to, yes, we're recording now. Thanks very much, Ava. I really appreciate it. We always start out by thanking Ava so much for hosting me out of the kindness of her heart. And
she's here with us every time.
She's here with us every time. That's really nice. Thank you so much. And we always start out by asking if anybody that's in the room has a pressing issue that they would like addressed.
Or good news to share.
Or good news to share. And so we'll be quiet and give you a chance to speak. Tandir, did you want to say anything?
Oh, no, I'm just trying to get in.
Come on.
Okay.
Okay.
Once you're settled in, if you would mute yourself, we won't get feedback from you. Thank you, Master Tandir. Hearing nothing else, seeing no hands up, I'm going to turn the camera over to Master Paddy. And Master Paddy is very special for me. He is sort of the center of kink, BDSM, and master slave activity in Alabama, of all places. And he has a marvelous retreat that he has built in Troy. And he's the head of an extensive family, and he's very active in mentoring students into the process of leather. And Master Paddy himself is a psychology professor at the university and heavily credentialed as a test and measurements guy in psychology. So, Master Paddy, I'm going to turn the camera over to you, and I'm going to let you have the evening until you tell me that you want us to take the camera back. So there you go, Master Paddy Fairclough. And I'm going to do that.
Thank you, and thank everyone that's in attendance. This is a special opportunity for me. I am an educator, and I'm out in the field of education. And so anytime I have a chance to interact and educate and especially to learn from others, I always look forward to that sort of opportunity. So thank you again for having me on this podcast or recording. I do appreciate it. I do lecture as a professor. I have lectured, although I generally feel it's better if we have a sort of flowing conversation. That way I get to learn too, instead of just sort of telling you what I think. The topic, as you see, if you're seeing it as I am, building a chosen family. Originally, I was born in the South, but spent most of my life up in Detroit. And the Detroit area is very energized with the BDSM world or community. And I spent many years sort of as a solo practitioner in an MS marriage, which unfortunately ended. And the person that I next took as a slave really felt that she needed to be part of a community to feel fulfilled. And so with a little kicking, I guess, sort of drugged me into the community. And I've never regretted that. I've made so many close connections and wonderful friends like Bob and Jen that I never regret being part of the community. And when I came from Detroit to Alabama, especially southeastern Alabama, there was no community at all here. The closest sort of community was an hour and 20 away, I would imagine, hour and a half away. And so being the sort of type A personality that I am, I thought, well, what can I do to form a community, to build a community? And so about 2 years ago now, we started a thing called Troy Lunch. And our first meeting had 5 people in it. And today, I think there's around 200 or so that belong. And it turned out that there was a community here, but it was sort of waiting, I guess, for a place to come to be part of. And, you know, unlike your large cities like Detroit, where there are many items on the buffet, if you will, in that area, I think I can speak conservatively and say 365 days of the year, you have to choose between one or two different lunches or parties that you might want to go to, or educational events. And there are some wonderful organizations up there. I won't name them, so I might forget one. But if you're familiar with the Detroit area, there are wonderful organizations up there doing a lot of education, a lot of community building. And so I thought, well, how can I do that? And one of the things I did is I started a munch. And then I decided that I would share my knowledge. As I've said before, if we think about the Dalai Lama, one of his quotes is, sharing your knowledge is a way to achieve immortality. And although my goal wasn't to achieve immortality, it seemed like a laudable thing to do that would both benefit me and sort of help form a community. So I began training and mentoring. And in training and mentoring, I used an awful lot of Bob and Jin's books and others. In fact, there's a reading list that's associated with our house on FET of many of the books that I use to sort of encourage growth and to cause people to question their sort of core values, their beliefs, and hopefully cause a bit of cognitive dissonance where they're sort of wondering where they are, and those contents didn't have to sort of settle. And as they settle, maybe they can see their life in a different way, in a positive way, and sort of on a growth trajectory. And I myself, I feel strongly, others could disagree with me, of course, but I feel strongly that I was sort of born as a dominant. The nature-nurture debate, of course, still continues at some levels. And a lot of things in my environment contribute to that too, such as, my father and his father. I would say sadists, definitely not out in our community, sort of sadists, in their own way, and dominance. And as I went through my education in academia, I encountered a lot of pushback in that community and in the therapeutic community. I'm also a therapist, that wanted to pathologize people in the world. And what I choose to say is a BDSM orientation, not a lifestyle. And I'll give you my reasoning for it. In my opinion, neurons that fire together wire together. And so I've known so many people that have had a BDSM orientation, if you will, and they've said, I've had it with this, I'm going to be a vanilla, and I'm never going to do this again, and 6 days, 6 months, 6 years, they seem to come back. And I've heard the same sort of things said by people who are LGBT, lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans. And I think some of that is about an inability to accept oneself. And so when I thought about building the community, I thought, what can I do to sort of model acceptance, not just of some, but of everyone? Because I do believe there should always be a place for everyone at the table. Whoever you are, wherever you are, there should be a place for you at the table, if you will. And so my chief motivation, my highest good, is to, when I meet someone, is to meet them in a place of acceptance, wherever they are, not where I think they should be or where I think they should go, but wherever they are, and then hopefully open an intentional dialogue of growth and exploration. And if I may become academic just for a minute, if we talk about a branch of theory called object relations theory, what I always attempt to do is to hold a space for people that enter my life, a space of love, as unconditional as possible, a space of acceptance and non-judgment. And it's all about the intentionality with which I proceed in that. And as a result of doing that, we've had many successful trainees. We've had many successful trainees and mentees, and I committed a certain amount of financial resources to buying a large piece of property, 120 acres, and building a large campground where anyone could come and feel accepted. And oftentimes when people come to visit, they pick up on that, and they say, this is like coming home. I feel so welcomed here and so accepted. And I think that's a key to building community, to move away from the idea of elitism, to move away from the idea of exclusion, and to move to a place of inclusion, I would even say, by some people's standards, radical inclusion of everyone that is within our smaller world, because most of us, I believe, are at some level separated from the dominant discourse, the larger world that exists in the U.S. And so, for me, that intentional purpose of seeking out others, and I say this as a dominant, to be of service to, and also to learn from, is very important. I do some demos that I have some proficient skill levels in, and people often say, well, you know, it's 3 or 4 hours where we are, what do you charge, or whatever. Luckily, I have the financial resources, I don't have to charge. And I tell them, I see this as my service to the community. If I have knowledge that might benefit someone and you want me to come and talk about that, then any time I can do that at no cost at all, but my time, I'm willing to do that, because I believe if any one of us in our community is helped, if any one of us looks better, then we're all helped, and we all look better. And so that's sort of my way of thinking about communities, and I have more, of course, to say, but I'm wondering if there's any discussion that anyone would want to engage in at this point about anything I've said.
To jump in here, it's a rare opportunity to have somebody such as with Master Paddy's background in psychology, as well as experience in the master slave culture available. And I know there are some very senior people in the room today. So if you have anything, I encourage you to speak up, and I'm going to mute myself.
Yes, please. I would encourage you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free. Feel free. I may not have the answers, but I guarantee you we can engage in a conversation that hopefully we'll both learn something from. And so I'll give you a moment to think if you want to comment, and then I'll sort of proceed with my line of thoughts. So the question is, how do you avoid the trappings of insider-outsider social dynamics from emerging? Well, if I can unpack your question, and please feel free to correct me if I err in my interpretation of what you said. What I think that you're suggesting is that there might be a sort of core clique formed within a group, and then when you have newcomers come into that group, they might feel like outsiders. How do you sort of make them feel welcome and not have a clique that develops? Am I correct in what I'm asking? Yes, okay, thank you. Again, I think I've had experiences with organizations where you are never quite welcome fully, unless you're a master, or unless you engage in a specific kind of play, or unless you're a slave. That sort of thing can occur, and I've experienced that. All right, to answer your question, again, going back to object relations, the notion that you, or I'll say the notion that I have the potential to respond or act in many different ways. As I believe all humans have the potential. I can be cruel, I can be self-serving, narcissistic, I can be any of these things. But what I choose to do, so it's a matter of choice, I choose to determine in advance what my intentionality is. So for example, when I decided to build a community in this sort of area of Alabama where there was none, I thought, what is my purpose for building this community? And I thought, well, one of the things that I want to make sure is that everyone feels accepted, so that no one is left out. And so in the back of my mind, any decision that I make subsequent to that initial choice, that intentionality, must fall subservient to that first choice. Is that making sense so far? Okay. Now, speaking for a moment from a mental health issue perspective, sometimes people have issues that they bring with them from their past. And sometimes it's very difficult to keep that intentionality focused and to work with someone that has sort of issues from the past, if you will. In a Freudian sense, we might call it a projection, where they project whatever their issues are onto you or onto the group that you're with. And again, there's a fellow by the name of Carl Rogers, and I believe that his core conditions that he's talked about for therapy work in life too. That when we encounter someone that may have stuff from the past that's sort of influencing the way they act or respond, even if your intentionality is to be welcoming and non-judgmental, they might feel that way even if you don't put that out there. They might project that. And I think one of the ways that I've dealt with that, the best that I can, of course, none of us are perfect, is to love them as a human being first, unconditionally, without reservation. I think we can all agree that we can love a person as a human being. In any way, we can love them as a human being. At least I can. Also, I want to be real and genuine. I'm always going to be real with the person. So being real, being genuine, loving unconditionally, and showing warm, positive regard while still being real. I think those are sort of very central to the notion that people that come into your presence, whoever you are, wherever you are, they get a different sense. In my opinion, in the United States today, so much of us are on guard a lot. And I would say some of the studies I read indicate we're touch deprived. We're not making physical contact really with other people, and we feel isolated. And one of the ways to combat that, in my opinion, is to focus with intentionality on holding a place of acceptance, holding a space, if you will, where anything that you're going to do, decisions that you're going to make, have to fall in line with those first decisions that I made to start a community. To, in any way that I could, help people feel that they're not judged, that they're accepted, that they're respected, that I have a positive regard for them, that is, as much as it can be, at an unconditional level. Is that making sense so far?
Master Paddy, can I just interject here for a second?
Yes.
Let me take Cooks's question a little more broadly than a one-on-one. In my experience, some clubs at the director level decide that they are specifically going to break that insider-outsider barrier, and they go out of their way to make sure that there are people that are senior within the club that instead of socializing together, break up and greet new people. And I do not want to name clubs, but there's one specifically in Arizona that is so stupendous at this and that I asked the directors about it. I said, how come you everything here feels so welcoming? And they said that there had been some problems in the past, and the current directors had decided that breaking that barrier down and being open and welcoming to newcomers was their priority. I'll also tell you that here in Austin, when I started back in 2001, and I write about this in one of the books I'm doing right now, I said, you know, I was 56 at the time, and I went to this one munch, and I was pretty well ignored. And nobody came over and sat with me, and people were all clicked up like that. 2 weeks later, I went to a different munch where people were very welcoming, and I felt that this was would be open and receptive for me, and I joined that group. And for those of you that know me here in Austin, you'll know which group I didn't join and which group I did join. But it was really a matter of the board of directors and whether or not they were going to steer the club down a path that specifically was inclusive, or they didn't really give a fuck. Back to you, Paddy.
Well, and to talk about it for a moment, and then I'll address what's on the screen. talk about it for a moment, you know, I'm sort of speaking in more abstract terms about my decisions and my choice and the sort of group of people that gathered around me because of them. But there are, of course, as you mentioned, concrete ways that I believe will help ensure that. Nothing is guaranteed in life, but if we advance with intentionality and with a plan, chances are we're going to meet our plan. And when we reach our goal, if we've already established one, we'll know if we've reached it. And that's one of the things that we do here as well. My slave Ona, one of the reasons that I care for her so much, I guess, is because she's got this sort of bubbly, effervescent part of personality. And I didn't really have to talk to her much. I didn't have to give her instructions, just sort of who she is. And I guess that's part of what drew us together, is that anyone that comes in, if you have not met Ona, you have not been to our place. Because she's going to make it a point, and other members that have been here a while are going to make it a point to meet you and to welcome you and to see how you're doing and who you are and what your interests are. To have that sort of attitude of being welcome. And what's on the screen here is, how do you see the collective attitude reflects the same attitude and acceptance for greater intention? If I can, I'll take you to a fellow by the name of Bandura. And he talks about modeling behavior and social learning. And so it's been my experience both in the realm of psychology and counseling and also in the corporate world when I was part of it, that the leader and those that are immediately under the leader and those that continue down from there set the tone. And I think that's what Dr. Bob was talking about a moment ago, is in one place the tone was set as we're going to welcome people, we want people to feel welcomed here, and at the other place they just didn't care. And I think that goes a long way. I think that you sort of get a critical mass, if you will, or sort of gravity, maybe gravity's better, a gravity that builds. So when I started to form the community with the sort of ideas and intentionality I had, it attracted certain people to me who had like ideas. And as that sort of builds gravity, it seems to draw more and more people to it. And so I didn't, in a concrete way, set forth rules that had to be followed about how we're going to maintain the intentionality that I started with. Instead, I believe, at least, I modeled the behavior that I hoped I would see in others. And those that came, I believe, sort of signed on to that. And then they also modeled that behavior. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think the idea about social learning and modeling cannot be overlooked in any sort of culture, corporate, in a club, here, where we are. I don't think it can be overlooked. I think it's a very important aspect of building a strong community. Does that answer your question? Thank you. And two, I think part of
Master Michael has Master Paddy, Master Michael has his hand up. Master Michael, if you'd like to go ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to stop Master Paddy if he had a thought to finish.
No, please go ahead. I don't somehow have my screen adjusted, so wow, there are a lot of people in the room. I only thought there were 4 people in the room, so I could see. But I see there's a lot in here. So please alert me if somebody has their hand up. Please go on with your questions, sir.
Well, thank you, Master Paddy. I find this topic very timely, so I'm appreciating everything I hear. I have to say, I don't have training as a therapist, and so this question comes from that perspective. Because this sort of family building, community building, especially when you talk about mentoring or bringing people in close, it seems very intimate in terms of sharing space and energy. So with that in mind, what would you advise someone that's not trained like you are in how to maintain boundaries of safety for like your existing relationships, your existing family, when you're bringing in people who might bring, as you put it, their own projections, their own drama, or their own issues with them?
It's an excellent question that you ask. And it would pose a problem. And I'm not saying I'm perfect in any sense, but I do have a level of experience and clinical knowledge that others don't have. But even then, sometimes, we make mistakes. I don't know that there is a perfect answer to that excellent question. I know in my experience with other groups, there can, of course, be vetting, where you have probationary periods and things like that. We actually don't have a vetting process at all, and I know some would criticize me for that. In my place, or in my view, those of us that are here essentially are vetting continuously. And I've never been in a position to have to ask anyone to leave. I've had to ask somebody, hey, could we do this a different way? Or have a private talk with someone about a behavior that may be objectionable to others. But I haven't really seen that here. Now, I know in other groups that I've been in, there have been people who have been banned or asked to leave, and those kinds of things have happened. And I don't want to seem Pollyannish here, but I do want to say that, if I expect a reaction or a behavior, I expect it. Often my expectation will not be disappointed. If I expect negative things, I'll often get them. If I expect positive things, I'll often get them. But I think what you said is an excellent question. I may need time to sort of think about that to provide a very cogent response. Several things do come to mind. And of course, vetting is one. Well, let me say this. I had a recent discussion because I am the head of a house, master of a house. I think we have, maybe 24 people total with full members and associate members. And I had a discussion with one of the mentees, a probationary member of our house not long ago. I think he's on now, Sir Christoph. We had a discussion about, as the house grows, now this isn't about the much, but as the house grows, how do we ensure, that we have a good, strong house? How does that continue on? Because originally, the way that my house was built, it was built from people that I had trained or mentored, who had then gone on and sort of received their own partners and then had a desire to be part of a house with me and with others that were in it. Because of the sort of values that we have and things that we stand for and the ways that we believe, and that, one of our first rules, no drama. Unless it's necessary, then it's not drama. And people were attracted to that way of thinking and that sort of model behavior. And the difference now, of course, is we have people that are attempting to apply for membership to our house that we haven't known for 3 months or 6 months or a year, or that haven't been trained by a member of the house or mentored by a member of the house. They know people in the house and they say, hey, this is a really good thing and I want to be part of this. I'm excited. Could I be part of this? And so I think, and again, I'm not perfect. I'm just giving you my thoughts on it. I think the idea of not so much a hard vetting line, like you have to go to 8 public events, and then you go to 3 private events, and then finally you go to this event. Instead of that, I think a sort of ongoing personal evaluation. I don't want to seem too mystic, but how is the energy that I'm receiving from this person? How is the energy sort of flow going? Keeping in mind that sort of intentional first rule to provide a space that is not judgmental. How's that working for us? How are we all fitting together? Because for me, very much, it is a family of choice. Not always do we have great bio families that we come from. And a family of choice is a strong investment. And sometimes for people in the LGBT community or BDSM community, they fulfill roles and functions in our lives that are extremely significant and important, perhaps more than our bio families. And so I think that sort of observing without judgment, in a negative sense, I mean, obviously we judge everything every moment of our life, but observing without negative expectation and judgment, I think goes a long way. And yes, I could see that there could be people that might bring their projections. And I think if we address that openly and honestly, being genuine and real, and even when a person is at their worst behavior, finding some way that we can love them as a human being, I think that goes a long way too. And I think that it's helpful. I'm sorry that I don't have a sort of concrete formula to that question. I don't know if one exists. But
I appreciate this. I appreciate your answer.
I'm giving you my honest answer. I will say that. And someone's typed something.
And I'm just passing it on, and I wanted to wait until you were done with your thoughts. But it is a book that concisely it goes over what drama is. Con artists. The sections are classic games, con artist games, elder abuse games, games liars play, games landlords play, office games people play, and I'm only up to page 39 out of 281. So it's a very interesting book that I wanted to let you know about, Master Paddy, but let others know about. I just got it in the mail yesterday.
And I'm smiling because what the book is talking about is TA, transactional analysis. And I myself am a neo-Freudian primarily, but I've been trained in TA and I've used TA a lot. And as you read that book, you're going to read about intimacy, openness, happiness, many of the things that I've been talking about in a different way. Yes, from a TA perspective, the idea that all of us carry around with us all the time, a sort of inner parent, an adult, and a child, and what I'm talking about is sort of traditional transactional analysis. A lot of those experiences for me in my training have sort of formed who I am at my core. So when I talk about object relations or I talk about transactional analysis, I've sort of internalized those things. They've just sort of become who I am. And I guess in a way that is an answer to the question that's posed. Even though a person may not have a PhD, that doesn't mean they don't have wisdom, and it doesn't mean they can't gain wisdom. And so I think in the spirit of being a lifelong learner and a leader, especially in a leather community or master-slave community or any community, self-education can never be underestimated, in my opinion. And of course, Dr. Bob's books on relationship was fabulous to me when I first opened them. Opened my eyes to a lot of things. And my members of my house, trainees, mentees, I've strongly recommended to them to read those, and they have, and they've benefited from them. And yet they haven't, done a PhD. And so I think a piece of this is, listening to this recording or this simulcast, whatever we want to call it, and sort of having your own ideas develop. The idea about the question, how do you deal with that when people bring projections in? Well, I would definitely recommend transactional analysis. I would recommend intentional dialogue, which is part of logotherapy, imago therapy. Intentional dialogue, part of imago therapy. And these are resources that you can read. You don't have to have a degree. You can sort of read them and begin to formulate that sort of core experience and core expression of really exercising intentionality. And you'll hear me say intentionality a lot because I think it's sort of a thread, sometimes hidden, sometimes not, that weaves through most of the theoretical orientations out there that helpers use to help others, whether it's psychological or theological or anything else.
Master Paddy, I had a question. Boy, I got feedback like crazy. I'm curious about if you have a family and someone in a family wants to bring someone else in and nobody else really wants them in, what do you do?
All right, can you hear me now? I muted myself, hoping to settle down the feedback a little bit. Well, I'm also a group worker, so I do a lot of run groups, group therapy, that kind of thing. And I think that when we're talking about the family as a group, say you have 10 people in your family, and the 10th person wants to bring the 11th person, and the other 9 don't really want to have that person come in. Now I think what we're dealing with is not the want to or not to. I think what we're dealing with is a dynamic within the group. And again, if we follow that formula, I guess I'll call it a formula, or Rogers 4 conditions, to talk about honestly, this is how I feel, using a lot of I statements. This is what I believe. This is how I feel. This is what I desire. This is what I want. This is what I need. And of course, there's always a big difference between wants and needs, and we have to clarify that. And having a very open and engaging conversation amongst the members of that family, not based on hierarchical understandings of power, but based on true concern for one another as part of the chosen family, I believe, generally, we'll find a resolution that will work with everyone. Now, if there's dysfunctionality present in that family, it may lead to more. And all families, from time to time, have disagreements, arguments, and if you look at the work of John Gottman and his work with couples, he cites in his research that it's not whether or not you argue. That's not the problem. The problem is, how do you resolve and recover from that argument? That's the key issue. So yes, people can argue and sort of get out of sorts, but how do we recover from that? How do we come back from that? And where do we move forward from that? And to me, that's the biggest question. In the example that you give of somebody wanting to come in and others not wanting, I would want to have a very open, frank discussion. It's called family meeting. And if that's not possible, then I have to question what dynamics are present that are keeping that from happening. I don't know if I've answered that fully. Have I?
Master Tandir can.
Yes, sir, you did. Thank you very much.
And Dr. Bob had mentioned that he could sort of support what I was saying. I would love for you to chime in.
Okay, you were speaking about transactional analysis, and I wanted to make that real for people. In its very simplest form, transactional analysis talks about adult voice, parent voice, and child voice. And at its very basic level, what happens is that when somebody is speaking in child voice, which means you're filled with emotional terms, and if somebody responds to that with parent voice, which is you should, you must, so it's an authoritarian voice, you'll re-trigger the child voice and you'll get yourself in hot water. You're going to be at each other's throats. The only way to break the cycle is for one of you to drop into adult voice. And I've discussed all of that in my Communications 401 book, but I don't want, the Game-Free Life, the book that I put up, really simplifies transactional analysis, and I found somebody with the book and I scanned it and I was so impressed that I think there's a lot of application for that book with everyday life and specifically with tight master-slave dynamics where you can get a lot of stress, particularly with the authority imbalance. And drama can creep into here, and the book has lots of strategies about breaking that loop. Back over to you, Master Paddy.
I agree with everything that you've said. I haven't read the book myself, but again, I teach transactional analysis as a method of as a theoretical orientation and I'm very favorable of it. And I also see Master Michael has posted a link. I'm not going to go there because I don't want to mess up the thing that I'm doing here. But just to talk about that briefly, one of the presumptions that's present in intentional dialogue is the idea that many of us go through our day or through our life and we don't truly feel as if we're being heard. And this has got a wonderful exercise for couples where, and again, I was trained in this 10 years ago. So I'm a little bit rusty on some of the concepts. I'd have to review it if I was going to teach it today. But as I recall, the idea is we're going to take turns. I'm going to tell you, for example, I'm going to use my statement. I'm going to say, when you do X, I feel Y. Now, your job then is to say back to me what you just said. Not to comment on it, not say great or lay judgment, just to come back to me and say, I believe you said, when I do X, you feel Y. Is that correct? And then you say, yes, that's correct. And then I say, is there more? And then you might say, well, yes. And when I feel why, it's very upsetting to me because when I was a child or when I was this or that, it affected me in this way. And you just keep going until that person feels they've been completely and utterly, fully heard. And then it's the other person's turn. And I realize some people think it's very mechanical and very formulaic and sort of reduces the spontaneity of the moment. And those may be valid criticisms, but part of what it does is it allows a person who may not have felt this way all day, all week, all month, perhaps in many years, to know that there's one person on this planet that is given the time and investment to actually heard everything they wanted to say on this topic. And that can be life-changing for some people. And especially in an MS dynamic, we have our own rituals and protocols that everyone I'm sure has. And one of those things is we have journals that my slave writes in, and they're for different purposes. And one of those journals is for her to write in to speak freely. Whatever she writes in there, she's not going to get in trouble for it or anything else. It allows her a space to say whatever is on her mind, whether she feels it's great, bad, insane, crazy, whatever she feels it is, and no matter what I feel it is. And then she has the right, I've given her, to say, could I talk to you about my journal? Could you read my journal? Could we talk about it? And then I'll read the journal. There's 3 of them, but I'll read that one. And then we'll have a discussion. And I'm not on the offensive. I'm not on the defense. I'm merely trying to make sure that I've fully heard whatever it is that she wishes to communicate to me. And then she communicates it back. And then once we have that understanding, now we can move towards either A, just feeling heard. Sometimes that's all we need. But sometimes, maybe sometimes we're going to move into a resolution if that's what we feel that we need. And I think Imago is great for that. And there are a lot of other things out there. I see someone's posted. Yes. Yes. PT. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of these out there. And again, imagine the question was asked earlier about someone not coming into the family that you want in and others don't. Imagine using intentional dialogue to see what that's about. Questioning, what are wants, what are needs, where's that reality coming from? What expectation is it supporting or is it not supporting? I think that's very important. And there are lots of tools out there. I agree with this one as well, and there are many more that we can use. And again, as Dr. Bob has said, his books contain some excellent tools. I say that both personally and professionally.
Jen and I would like to add something to the when you, I feel.
Yeah.
But Jen had discovered, Master discovered a couple of years ago was, I think it came from our life coach, that if you take it one step further, when you, when you do X, I take that I make that mean Y.
And I can, again, agree with what you've said. Imago is one tool. The version I gave of it is very simple. There are other sort of additives and other pieces to it that can be used, similar to what you've just said. And again, we have to find things and tools that specifically work for us. I often tell my students when they're first learning to become therapists, I say, when they say something like, well, you know, you make me angry, you make me sad. And I say, really? I thought that was your choice. I didn't realize I could make you do anything. And that causes usually a little shift. And they're like, I suppose you can't actually make me do anything. I'm choosing to be that way. And that comes to us from Viktor Frankl and logotherapy, and also from the late William Glasser, choice theory or reality therapy. And I'm throwing these specific names out in the hopes that if you're hearing this, you might jot that down and maybe take a little exploration and a little side trip into these sort of therapeutic realms, not as a therapist per se, but just to increase your own knowledge about interpersonal workings. Because we will all find some way of getting from point A to point B. For me, I might love a pickup truck. Somebody else might like an Audi or a Cadillac. But we're going to try to find a way to get from point A to point B. And it won't be the same conveyance necessarily for everyone. You have to find the one that fits us, and especially fits our relationship. And there are some that may not fit everyone's relationship, especially not an MS relationship, whereas others might. So in my way of thinking, the more we talk about ways to communicate, the more we talk about being together in a positive space, the more we grow, the more we learn, the better off we are. And now, someone had mentioned earlier about, and I think we might have skipped over it, the question was, what are the most common conflicts that tend to crop up in your community? And do you hold space for resolution directly, actively, mediation? Again, I don't want to sound Pollyannish. To this date, I haven't had to actively mediate. However, if that does occur, and it very likely could, it could happen tomorrow, then I would use those skills that I have in mediation and conflict resolution. And again, someone might say, well, I don't have that in my background, in my education. Fair enough. However, there are, of course, great books out there on communication. Of course, Dr. Bob has several. But there are also specific books that you can purchase online, even used, about a specific area called conflict resolution. I don't have any in my head right now that I would recommend, but there are several books on conflict resolution, and I would suggest reading them. And if it seems to fit who you are at your core, seems to fit what you believe and the way you wish to proceed in your life, that's probably going to be a good book for you. Again, not everyone is going to have the same fit. For example, I stated earlier, I'm a neo-Freudian. I believe most of what Freud had to say in the 24-volume standard edition that most people haven't read, 24 collected books of his work. I don't believe everything. That sort of makes me a neo-Freudian instead of a pure Freud. And I use those things as an integrative therapist and as an integrative master. I use those things that work best for me and those that I'm involved with. And I would encourage everyone to do the same. And that does require work. It requires reading. But in my mind, and I'm sure Dr. Bob Master Jin would agree, it is putting in that work. Not saying that you're hard so I have to do the work, but a mutual agreement that we're going to put in the work into our relationship to make our relationship work in the best way for us. That's not sort of just coming home and kicking off the shoes and sitting down and saying, well, it's going to get done. It requires both people, I believe, to sort of roll up their sleeves and actively be participants in each other's desires and wants and needs. Find out our verbal self-defense, yes. Yep, very good book. Yep. So again, I don't know if I sort of fully addressed that question, but I would engage and study conflict resolution strategies.
Saying is part of a presentation we're doing at Master Slave Conference this weekend called New Relationship Energy, How to Keep New Relationship Energy Going to Keep Romance in Your Relationship. And when we're starting this out, we're saying, you know, it's not a question of keeping new relationship energy going so much as it's a question of, are you actually willing to re-engage in your relationship, period?
Do the work.
Now, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to read a little bit about negotiation and about communication style? Because if you're not willing, then there's not a whole lot of point in us sitting up here giving you suggestions on how to bring romance into your life. You got a lot of couples out there that are withholding for reasons that evolve over the course of their time together. But I'm not going to digress, and I'm going to be quiet and turn it back to you, Master Paddy. Goodbye.
Well, as usual, I agree with you, Dr. Hopp. And I think that is important. One of the things that I love about the BDSM orientation, at least my version of how I live this life, is the notion that, you know, when we come together, there's a negotiation. I respect anyone however they want to live their life. I believe in contracts. I believe that contracts free us. They don't imprison us, they free us. And I think that having a contract, negotiating a contract, even Ona and I have been together for 2 years, and when we moved to a formal collaring and slave and master contract, we spent 2 weekends, pretty much all of the 2 weekends, sort of negotiating that and saying, well, is this a sticking point? Is that a sticking point? And I'm sure that some people would say, wait a minute, you've been together this long, and you know you're a master and she's a slave, and you spent like 48 hours twice negotiating it? Yeah, and I did, and I'm glad I did, and I would do it again in a minute if I had to, and I'm sure that she's glad she did. Because now those lines of communication are solidly drawn, and they're clear, they're unblocked, and we can discuss all of that. I see Senric and Belisi are on, who are also members of our house. I would have to agree. And originally when I was training Belisi as a slave, before her master arrived, we were looking for him, and he came. She was trained, of course, with Dr. Bob's books, and she is, in my opinion, an excellent communicator, as is her master. And I think, again, it's that willingness to do that work and that willingness to talk and negotiate. I think it's so essential to any relationship, but more especially, in my opinion, in our relationships. And I say that because you know, I'm a big fan of impact play. I really love impact play. And lots of different kinds of play, as a matter of fact. I'm sort of really getting interested in the whole Easton thing, but that's another conversation. Communication is the bedrock of what we do in the relationships that we have, and more especially, I think, in people that have a BDSM orientation, because we're, at least in my mind, we're constantly sort of pressing the envelope. We're constantly pushing boundaries and mapping out new and wonderful, kinky, psychological terrain. And if we don't have communication, how can we continue to be those sorts of explorers and cartographers of that wonderful psychological area that we sort of move through? So again, I agree completely. We have to be willing, if we want those sort of high-level and peak experiences in our life with those who we care about, I think, at least for me, I'll say I have to be willing to engage at those deep levels of conversation. And of course, I have my own views.
Mr. Michael has his hand up. Mr. Michael, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, please do.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Just to bring it back to the topic about setting out and establishing a family, do you set out with specific goals when someone comes in your family? Is it like, are you creating a relationship like boy, girl, sub, slave, or is it more about training or teaching? And how do you establish or communicate that up front?
We have documents that we've created that talk about our motto, that talk about what is important to us, our sort of core beliefs as a house, and a sort of general guidelines and rules that we choose to follow. When a person seeks admission, usually because they've been around us, this has been our past, they've been around us so much, they sort of know these things through osmosis, and they've already made that choice that this is what they want to be associated with. And so we'll say, you know, have you read these things, and how do you feel about them, and do you agree with them? And then we'll have an interview where we'll ask some very specific questions of them and allow them to ask some very specific questions of us. And sort of to talk about, I think what you're asking is, my expectation is for them to come and be present with us, to become part of us. And we encourage diversity. And one of my trainees is a trans woman who I dearly love, Amanda. And, you know, she comes with her own unique gifts, and her own diversity itself, I believe, is a gift. And so I think you can have what you might call a homogeneous group, where everyone's in lockstep, and everyone has the same gifts, and everyone's on the same page about everything. But in my mind, having diversity, having people with different ideas, they may ascribe to your central sort of tenets, if you will, but still having that freedom of expression and to communicate, you know, what they believe is important. And another key aspect too, if I might briefly, last year on December 1st, and I belong to a sort of a two-house system. There's a northern pillar and a southern pillar. One's up in Detroit with a dear friend of mine, a brother of mine, Eyes of Ice, is up in the Detroit area, and then I'm down here, and he's the master of that pillar, and I'm the master of this pillar. But I mentioned to the group, we had a big family gathering. There was a holiday dinner, and we were all together, and it was wonderful and as a family. And I said, I want you all to know that next December 1st, my birthday, that weekend, I want to open up the leadership of this house, and I want us to have an election. And if you wish me to stay as the master of this house, then I'll stay. If somebody else is voted in, then I would love to support that, because I believe no one has the final answer on anything. We all can learn from everyone and from each other. And my purpose for doing that, and I had planned to do it from the beginning, after the first year or two of the house forming and becoming strong and all these initiatives that we put in as family and community, was to remove the idea that I have, you know, like the only answers. Oftentimes when a person starts something, they're sort of looked on as, you know, forgive my irreverence, but the mouth of God. This person knows all. And I don't feel that way. I feel that we all have something to learn from each other. No one has a corner on the ideas market. And I think it removes a substantial amount of ego when you role model the notion that while I enjoy serving the house and being in this role, if the house wishes somebody else to do this, I'm happy for them to do it and to help out in ways that I can. And some people, of course, would totally disagree with me. You know, they would say, no, you have to maintain that structure. But I don't think so. I think that allows investment, complete investment in all the members of the house to know that they might run the house at some point in one day. And some of their ideas will be discussed. Hopefully they've already been talking about them, but if they haven't, that they would. And so that's, again, I think removing that essence of ego is healthy, and it causes the house to be in a sort of growth trajectory rather than one of stagnation, because nobody has all the brand new ideas. Everyone has brand new ideas that they can share, in my opinion. And I see here there's a question about, is there a difference between a house and a family? And I would be happy to let anyone else field that question if they wish to. I have my own views.
I would say how a family is led by one person, but you may have multiple families within a house.
I would tend to agree with that. And you're very welcome, Sir Michael. Thank you. Excellent question. All the questions have been excellent. And again, there are many texts on the subject, and earlier before we came on, we were talking about the notion that in 1945, returning gay Leathermen sort of started this movement, and whether or not that is a romanticized myth, and what part of that do we believe, and all that. And I think that that discussion can be had about many things about BDSM practices, protocols, dogmas, definitions, those sorts of things. So I'll define it for myself, and I'll say that I have a family that I consider to be a chosen family. It just so happens that the people in my house I do consider family. Now, sort of a technical definition, I think you could say one person leads a family, you can have several families that make up a house. But for me, and maybe it's just unique to my way of thinking, everyone in my house is a part of my family, a part of my chosen family. Now, some of that comes from the language that we find in the LBGT community, where we talk about, our bio families turning their backs on us. And so we choose our family, and we choose our family members. And I spoke a little bit about that earlier. But for me, people who are members of my house are part of my chosen family. And again, that's a different response than you might get from many people. But if you think about the things that I've said already and what I've been saying, that way of thinking about people fits in, if that makes sense to you.
We've got a little bit of a quiet moment. It is 5 after 9. So if you had anything that you would like to say to wrap this up, I'd encourage you to do that. And if anybody has been holding on to a question that they really would like to have addressed, I know Coates had written a question about what some of the language in your own MS contract. And Coates, privately to you, I'll say that that happens to be a section I was working on today for one of the books. And I'm going to send you my version tomorrow privately. I'll send you my version of a sort of a mutual contract between master and slave during the when they're first starting to get together, where they're saying, look, this isn't too serious here. We're supposed to be having fun. I'm not going to punish you because I don't know you well enough. We're just going to learn about one another. What do you think? Sign on the dotted line. And by the way, no, I'm not taking on your debts right now. But on the other hand, you're not my property either. So, yeah, I'd be interested in anything that you'd like to add about what you, Master Paddy, put in your contract. And it happens I'm working on contracts in my master slave book. Pen and paper is ready in case you want to say something.
Well, I will say that everyone does things a little different. I have a general consideration contract that's very brief, very similar to what Dr. Bob just said. And then I have an informal consideration contract that's about 9 pages long, single-spaced. And then I have a formal consideration contract that's about 12 pages long, single-spaced. And that's why it takes, 2 weekends sort of negotiate through line by line. It talks about a lot of things that I believe in, just as a very brief aside, and maybe you've already read something about this. It's my own personal opinion, but there's often parallel development. I have a rule about sexual fulfillment. goes in my contract. It's the way I live my life. And a lot of people will disagree with me, but this is what I believe. I believe in the MS relationship that 50% of the time, there should be mutual satisfaction. And 25% of the time, the master should be completely satisfied, whether the slave is satisfied or not. And 25% of the time, the slave should be satisfied, whether the master is or not. And if we think about the percentage, that means either one of these people in the relationship, 75% of the time, is satisfied sexually, if we're doing what we say we're doing. I don't know most people in the world that will tell you, you know what, 75% of the time in my life, I am completely sexually satisfied. I don't know many people to say that. Now, some will say, I'm 100%. I think that's wonderful. And what I'm suggesting is really a sort of starting point to keep that communication line open about, am I satisfied? Am I not satisfied? Are you satisfied? Are we satisfied? So I have it in there as sort of a base document from which to proceed. But that's my rule about sexual fulfillment and satisfaction. And it's worked well for me in my life and continues to work well. May not work well for anyone else. But very specific pieces like that, I think, are important for your personal contract, whatever that contract might be. And I think it needs to be fully negotiated and fully understood with an intentionality that it's not, for me, the contract is not necessarily about, these are all things I want, these are all things you want. For me, it's what do we want to make our relationship a success? And what can we do to make our relationship a success? And in doing that, how will I be satisfied and how will you be satisfied? Because if I'm satisfied and you're not, the relationship is in trouble, and vice versa. So I think that's why, for me, it's so important to do that initial negotiation to a very high degree, very sophisticated level of impersonal negotiation. And I think if you go to the House of Twin Pillars, you'll see that there's the basic contract, I think, is posted on our house site. Well, thank you. It's been enjoyable to be with all of you. And I just want to briefly say one thing about the community building piece before we get that time. And that is this. So many people, in my opinion, so many people believe that they're broken and that they need to be fixed. And they buy into this idea of pathology, which really comes out of Freud's writings. And many therapists and psychologists today will still give you a diagnosis if you come and talk to them about your BDSM orientation. And part of community building, I think, is to refute that and to say, you know, you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. We accept you as you are. And if you want to grow, we're here to help you. And we'll do everything we can to help you. But first, we accept you. We accept you as you are with unconditional love because you're a fellow human being. And I think that's sort of one of the key points to building community.
For being on with us tonight. It's just been a real treat, and I have all kinds of notes written down, secret, and that I will undoubtedly throw into some book when it's small. But I just want to thank you so much for being for coming tonight, and thanks to everybody for joining in. And I'll be quiet for a minute if anybody has a last minute thing that they want to say. The next one is foot worship, I believe. I believe we have a foot fetishist coming on in 2 weeks.
I accept all requests for friends on FET.
Yes.
It's Master 2011.
Master Paddy 2011. Are there dashes? Put that up on the, type that in for us, would you? So that we can get the spacing right for you. And beyond that, I'd say thanks ever so much for joining us as always. It was delightful having folks in the audience. And it was really, really, really a treat, Master Paddy, that you came on tonight. I thank you for that so much. And with that,
for having me.
And with that, I guess I will say good night, one and all, and hope you have a lovely rest of the evening and a lovely Labor Day weekend coming up. Bye-bye.